How is the Lone Star State navigating its current electricity conundrum? This is a question that has been buzzing around recently, especially after the electricity regulator of Texas, ERCOT, issued a warning about potential rolling brown and blackouts on the 29th of April. The concern stemmed from the rising mercury, with temperatures expected to soar above 90 degrees in some parts of central and southern Texas. Thankfully, the situation did not escalate to a severe level, but it did ignite a conversation about the state's electricity situation. The issue at hand is two-pronged. The first culprit, which is beyond anyone's control, is climate change. With Texas experiencing hotter conditions and an expanding population moving into increasingly warmer areas, the pressure on the electricity system is mounting. When it's hot, electricity systems cannot transmit as much power. Furthermore, systems like water coolant mechanisms for nuclear power plants don't operate as efficiently. So a rise in temperature doesn't just amplify the demand, but it can also cause a dip in supply. The second issue is of an industrial nature and is expected to become a progressively larger problem. As we see cracks appearing in the Chinese and European systems, the United States is entering a phase of vigorous industrial regeneration. Industrial construction spending in the United States has magnified tenfold in the past 5 years, with Texas reaping a significant portion of the benefits. However, if we are to add a considerable amount of industry and manufacturing, we must brace ourselves for an increase in electricity consumption. Processes like the movement of metal, forging materials, and stamping are all electricity intensive. Even though we use more electricity for things like server farms, it pales in comparison to the energy consumed when we forge and move materials. It's estimated that the United States needs to double the size of its industrial plant, which will result in a 50% increase in electricity demand. For Texas, it's a triple whammy. The state is contending with an energy transition that is more electricity dependent, a population explosion due to the cost-effective living conditions, and broad-spectrum demand build in manufacturing. In conclusion, Texas is grappling with a complex electricity situation driven by climate change, industrial regeneration, and a population boom. As the state faces an energy transition, burgeoning population, and increased manufacturing, the demand for electricity is skyrocketing. The challenge now is to manage this demand effectively while also addressing the factors that are causing supply to dwindle. This is the conundrum that Texas, and indeed the rest of the United States, must solve moving forward. Could it be that the Lone Star State, known for its vast landscapes and oil-rich lands, is on the cusp of a power crisis? In an era where energy production and consumption are under constant scrutiny, the Texas power grid is a topic of intense debate and concern. It's a complex issue, one that's not only about the number of power plants or the miles of transmission lines, it's also about the regulatory structure. Texas operates its own grid independent from the rest of the United States. This autonomy has its advantages, but when the state faces a power shortage, it's largely on its own. The options? Overhaul its regulatory structure, introduce new power systems, or connect with the national grid, which would likely mean accepting federal regulation, a concept not warmly embraced in Texas. The state's approach to power management also needs rethinking. Currently, Texas only charges ratepayers when a power plant is operational. This penalizes companies that build systems that aren't in use all the time. However, these systems are critical during peak demand periods. Without them, the grid risks collapsing. Across the border, California presents a contrasting picture. The Golden State has enthusiastically embraced the green transition, removing coal and as much natural gas as possible from its grid. Yet it's not all sunshine and wind turbines. Every evening, California relies on an 11-gigawatt capacity cluster of lines that connects Los Angeles to the Arizona border. The electricity flowing in from Arizona is primarily generated from fossil fuels. In fact, California imports over 1/3 of its electricity, a statistic often overlooked when celebrating its green efforts. In conclusion, both Texas and California face significant challenges in their power grid management. Texas, with its independent grid and unique regulatory structure, needs to rethink its approach to power management and perhaps reconsider its stance on federal regulation. California, despite its green aspirations, must address its dependency on imported fossil fuel-generated electricity. In this energy saga, there are no simple solutions, but one fact remains clear. The future of our power grids requires innovative thinking, sustainable practices, and perhaps a willingness to challenge long-standing ideologies. The clock is ticking, and the energy demands of the future are not. Have you ever pondered, has California merely exported its carbon emissions? An intriguing quandary indeed, and one that uncovers the complex dynamics of environmental responsibility in our modern world. Let's delve into the heart of this matter by comparing two influential states, California and Texas. These two powerhouses, though differing in many aspects, share a common trait, a model of operation that arguably is failing. California, known for its stringent environmental regulations, has made significant strides in reducing its carbon emissions. Its commitment to renewable energy, the electrification of transportation, and the promotion of energy efficiency has set it apart as a pioneer. However, critics argue that California has merely outsourced its carbon emissions. How so? Through the import of goods and commodities produced in other more carbon-intensive regions. Essentially, the carbon emissions eliminated within California's borders may simply have moved elsewhere. Now, shift your gaze to Texas. This state, famed for its oil production, has a different story to tell. Texas's economic model, heavily reliant on fossil fuel industries, faces a unique challenge. With a booming population and increasing industrial activities, the state's carbon emissions are set to skyrocket. The demand build is expected to be explosive, forcing Texans to make some uncomfortable decisions and some very large investments very soon. Unlike California, Texas has not outsourced its carbon emissions. Instead, it's grappling with them head-on. However, this confrontational approach could lead to escalating carbon emissions if not managed properly. So, where does this leave us? Both models, California's outsourcing and Texas's confrontational approach, have their flaws and merits. However, the crux of the matter remains. Both these models need an overhaul. To summarize, the main points discussed in this video revolve around the carbon emissions models of California and Texas. We've explored how California, despite its green initiatives, might be outsourcing its emissions, while Texas, with its growing industrial sector, faces an imminent challenge of managing its carbon footprint. The question we must all reflect on is, how can these states evolve their models to truly address the carbon emissions problem? After all, the future of our planet depends on the decisions we make today. This is not just about California or Texas. It's about all of us taking responsibility for our environmental footprint. It's about finding sustainable ways to grow our economies without compromising the health of our planet. It's a complex issue, but one we must face together. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions on environmental issues.